Welcome. My name is Nathaniel, and this is Impact 2022, our continual conversation. For those of you who've been here before, the conversation that we have where we talk about different issues, whether it be social injustice, whether it be racial issues, current events, things of religion, anything. We have our conversations here where we're able to talk and get things out. And so I implore you, if you are there listening and you want to participate in this conversation, please feel free to type your questions into the comment section or type your comments into the comment section and they will be addressed. This is a conversation, so it goes back and forth. So for those of you who have been here before, you know how this goes. And those of you who are new to the program, please feel free to participate. And like most other weeks, we're just going to hop right into it. I'm going to tell you a little story. And that's how we're going to start this time. This is I'm going to read a little bit of this story just so I can make sure that I get it correct. And then we're going to talk about it. And this is about a young college student he's 21 at the time. And so I'll preface it with that. And it says, in 2014, I was a college student. I was walking down the sidewalk in Michigan, going between a summer job and my internship at a local nonprofit. Two men in jeans, t-shirts, and baseball caps approached me. They asked me who I was, and I told them, but they didn't believe me. One of the men took my wallet from my pocket. Thinking I was being mugged, I yelled for someone to call the police, and I tried to get away. The men tackled me, and one of them choked me until I lost consciousness. I thought it was over. When I woke up, I bit the guy in hopes of breaking free. He then punched me in the face over and over until every capillary in my eyes burst and I couldn't move. I heard sirens and I was relieved. The police were finally coming. But relief turned to confusion when the police arrested me, not the men who attacked me. Unbeknownst to me or the many witnesses who videotaped the scene and called 911, the muggers were cops. They were looking for a nonviolent fugitive who looked nothing like me. And when the uniformed police showed up, the system immediately went into action to protect the officers with no concern for my rights. One police officer forced people to delete their videos of the incident. Others took me to the hospital where I was handcuffed to the bed, and my notes of what happened were confiscated. Police and prosecutors charged me with felonies, put me in jail, then put me on trial, all with the hope that I would settle and therefore not have the credibility to hold these individuals accountable for their actions. A plea deal was offered to me the first morning of the trial, but I had done nothing wrong, so I didn't accept it. A jury acquitted me on all charges. And in 2016, this person then went on to sue the police officers, but once again, the system didn't work for him. And the government argued that they didn't violate his rights, and they argued qualified immunity, which many people have heard before. And basically, to make it a long story short, which I'm probably too late to do that, this case for this gentleman is going before the Supreme Court to determine whether or not qualified immunity should be continued, to challenge qualified immunity for his rights. And qualified immunity in the basic terms. So let me break this down for you. Let's see. Qualified immunity. All right. For those of you who may have missed some of that, you think all of it. Qualified immunity is the non-constitutional rule where the Supreme Court created back in 1982. It basically says that you can't sue an officer for violating your constitutional rights unless an earlier court ruled that the exact same event took place and was ruled unconstitutional by another court. So basically, in this gentleman's situation, unless there is another ruling by another court that said, and this has to be pre-82, so another ruling by another court pre-82 that said if you are beaten by plainclothes police officers and you don't know that they're police officers, and then and they haven't, the court didn't say that it was unconstitutional, then you can't sue because another court hadn't said that the exact same thing happened. And let me be clear, the way that they argue this law is that it has to be the exact same thing. And so in a previous situation, they had someone try to sue police officers because he was unarmed, had his hands raised up, and the police officers decided to sick their police dogs on the gentleman, and the dogs bit him. They, mauled him up and bit him and everything like that. And they said because there was not another case that was the exact same where somebody had his hands up. They had another case where somebody had their hands. See, they were sitting on their hands, and this guy had his hands up. And so, since those cases weren't exactly similar, qualified immunity prevailed over your ability to sue. So that's the topic of the day. And the topic of the day is basically, what's important is that these cases are going before the Supreme Court, and we can be pretty clear because there's certain people on the Supreme Court who, care not for the general population. I'll put it that way. Care not for the concerns of the general population. Not saying they don't care about. I'm not saying what they do care about, but they don't care about the general population. So maybe they care about the rule of law. Maybe they care about police officers. Maybe they care about interpreting Constitution. Maybe they care about pleasing certain people or whatever. I don't know. But what they don't care about is the general population and making sure that we are safe and making sure that we have rights. And so you can be kind of assured that qualified immunity may prevail in this case. The reason that this is important and the reason that I bring this up is because we've been talking over the time about police reforms, and we've been talking over the time about the rights of people of color when it comes to police. But in this scenario, and this gentleman he was just walking, and some plainclothes people came up to him and basically took his wallet and started to assault him. And what the gentleman pointed out was that could have been anybody. This even transcends race. That could have been anybody. And it also goes to the point of how are we safe if police officers can come up to you and treat you like a mugger or treat you like a criminal, and you have no clue who they are. They didn't say, hey, we're the cops. They didn't show any badges. They didn't do anything like that. As we know, if somebody comes up to you, one of the things that they say is if in these situations where something is going on, they say the first thing to do is you have to make your decision. Is fight or flight. Like, make your decision right away. What you don't do is just stand there. And so if somebody comes up to you and you feel uncomfortable, either get away, run, go, do whatever, or immediately fight. But you don't stand there, because that can lead you to becoming a victim of whatever the crime may be. And so that's what they encourage you a lot of times in these defense classes, and they encourage you in whatever, just make a decision and go with it. Fight, flight, do whatever. Well, in these situations where a plainclothes officer will come up to you, you got to make a decision. You can fight, you can flight. You don't know who this person is, just like any other decision. And if you fight and then you find out it's the cops, you in trouble. If you run and you find out it's the cops, you in trouble. So under what scenario are you not in trouble? This gentleman was black. Again, and we could call this a race issue, because probably was. I don't know what color the officers were. That detail wasn't given. But we do know that the gentleman who was assaulted was black. But regardless, this could have happened to anybody. So it is a race issue because, again, he was black. And I don't care if the other officers were black. It's a race issue. But it's also an issue of right and wrong. and we sit back and say, are we going to elevate certain people above other folk? You should be allowed to get beaten by the cops. You know, as he said, the capillaries, his eye was just beaten, choked out to where he lost consciousness, and then charged with crimes when he wasn't even the person that they were looking for. So what was he charged with? Resisting police, resisting arrest when you weren't knowingly being arrested. And they're taking the videotape from the witnesses or the cell phone videos from the witnesses and making them delete them. It's a significantly problematic situation. And when we talk about things like systemic racism, and we talk about things like systematic racism, and when we talk about things like basically the corruption of the system, the legal system, where from the start to the finish, where as not only are you assaulted by the cops, but then you're assaulted by lawyers and judges in the sense of, we're going to bring charges against you when you did nothing wrong. We're going to try to make you cop to a plea deal, hopefully thinking that you're not smart enough to know the ins and out of the legal system. So we're going to bully you into a plea deal so that we can get away with our crimes that we've committed. And so when people make these complaints and you look at a situation like this, you're like, well, come on now. Come on now. There has to be something wrong. And so if you are someone who really didn't get on board with Black Lives Matter, and you really didn't understand why people were marching and why people were complaining, if you are not really on board with understanding why people of color talk about the racial disparities, when you hear a story like this and you see that there's nothing you can do, there has to be some realization of, come on now. We have a comment: if a police officer is supposed to be a Christian, should they defend such actions and behaviors? And that's where the natural progression of this conversation goes. As Christians, where should you be in this debate? As Christians, is there an obligation to sit back and say, well, qualified immunity shouldn't be a thing? I would imagine it has to be very difficult, and I've seen plenty of them, but it has to be difficult to be a police officer and be a Christian in 2022. More importantly, in the years prior, it has to be very difficult to be a police officer and be a Christian at the same time. Because what you have to sit back and decide is, I am out here to protect and serve, but am I going to treat my fellow man with the proper respect that I'm supposed to treat him or her, because they're a human being? I can't. You don't treat a criminal the way that the world tells you to treat a criminal. You treat a criminal the way that the word tells you to treat a criminal. And so so it has to be a difficult place to play, a difficult conversation to have. And so when we look at it, so qualified immunity, meaning that if law enforcement does something inappropriate, unless there was a prior precedence, then you cannot sue the police for that inappropriate action. If they violate your constitutional rights, you cannot sue them unless there was a prior case. As Christians, whether it happened before or it happened today, if it's wrong, it's wrong. It's right, it's right. I haven't seen anything for us that says, well, unless you saw it before, then you don't have to. There's no moral ground there. There's no obligation there to treat people right. There's no obligation there to respect life. There's no obligation there to do unto others as you want them to do unto you, unless it's happened before. And so, I know that we are taught to respect the law, and I see as this goes before the Supreme Court, that they will make the decision about qualified immunity. But I implore us, as human beings, as Christians, as people who should be respecting one another, that qualified immunity is not the way to go. That qualified immunity, I believe, is not okay under any circumstance. You want to protect the police, I guess, to be able to do their job and from frivolous lawsuits, but to sit back and say, or sit back and have a law that says you can be done wrong, hurt, violated, whatever, as long as it hasn't been done before. So as long as you invent a new way to violate somebody's rights, as long as you invent a new way to harm someone, as long as you invent a new way to be a terrible police officer, you'll be okay. So just make your stuff new enough and unique enough. The pain that you inflict, make sure that it's not something that has been done before in that same manner, and you'll be okay. You'll be fine. And I think that's what's problematic. And so, as Christians, when we hear people complaining, when we hear people, saying police this and the legal system this, and I know some of us sit back and you hear folk talking and you're just like, oh man, goodness, and you roll your eyes. You're like, it's because you're a knucklehead. It's because you're doing this and you because you've done that. I think that when you hear stories like this, it makes you understand that there is something wrong. And our obligation is to listen to what they're saying, because when people are crying out, the worst thing that you can do is ignore. The worst thing that you can do, and I personally, I think the word backs that up. I think that that's what Jesus is talking about, is you don't ignore people who are crying out in pain. I think that is what, and I've said this a million times, and I always go to it because I think it's so significant of a story, or so significant of a parable, is that when you're talking about the Good Samaritan and you're talking about what people did as they walked by, the main point of that story that I gather is that you don't have the ability to be a good neighbor or the ability to be a good person and just ignore people. So when people cry out and play, you just don't ignore them. Act like you don't see them. Act like you don't care. And so as all of these protests happen, and if all of these complaints have happened over not just the past couple of years, but the entirety of our lives, where are we when people are complaining, when people are crying out? Are we ignoring them? Are we paying attention? As you can see with examples like this and many others, been numerous examples that come out. You can find numerous cases of where people are sitting back talking about the injustices that have happened to them because of the legal system. Are we just ignoring their pain? Because in this situation, it could be you or me. That shouldn't be the reason that you care, but it could have easily been you or me doing nothing wrong. He's walking. He's a college student walking. And his life, as he says, at 21 years old, he said his life was changed forever. Assaulted, beat for no reason. And it's the story is terrible. And he even says later on, he looked nothing like the person that they were looking for. Like absolutely nothing like the person that they were looking for. And so we're going to sit here and say, we dropped the charges, you just go home. That didn't heal his eye. That didn't make it so that when you were choked out in front of all of these people and choked out to where you passed out, that didn't heal that situation. You just don't drop, and you still tried to charge me. And so what is our Supreme Court going to do? You can be assured, because of the makeup of the Supreme Court and the type of characters that are on there now, probably nothing. But as individuals, what are we supposed to do? Continue to keep that pressure on. Continue to speak out against the way that some of the legal system is put up. Continue to speak out against qualified immunity, and continue to be informed about what's going on. Because not knowing what's going on doesn't help our cause. It doesn't help to be like, oh, I didn't know all that was going on, and then people are getting hurt. And a good comment in Isaiah 59, chapter 4. The scripture states, "No one calls for justice. No one pleads a case with integrity. They rely on empty arguments. They utter lies. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil. As a result, God does not hear us." Yeah. Yeah. And that's the result that we may be in because of our lack of integrity, because we're not looking for justice. And it's very clear when you have lawyers and prosecutors, particularly prosecutors, district attorneys, who make decisions not based on right or wrong, but base decisions on perception. And so we don't want to perceive to be soft. We don't want to perceive that if someone is not guilty and it looks like they're not guilty, but they're in jail, maybe we shouldn't revisit that because we don't want them to get out and make it look like we make mistakes. And so when we have people who are doing stuff on perception instead of looking for justice, instead of having integrity, then yeah, like it said, I think as a result, then God is not hearing us when we're crying out. We're not doing right. We're living in lies. We're living in falseness, and we're not doing truths. And so, and then we turn around with our lying lips and trying to talk to God. I don't think He's not hearing us. He's not hearing that. I think that's what it's saying there, and I agree with it. I think our responsibility, especially those, all of us, we're not lawyers. All of us are not lawyers or in the legal system, but our responsibility is to push as much as we can to make those changes. It's important that, like I'm beating a dead horse on this one. It's important that we vote and we put the people in that we believe will support justice and support truth. Not that they're going to be right or perfect or anything like that, but they're not intentionally trying to go in and support lies or intentionally trying to go in and support untruths. And we have plenty of people who are doing that. And what we have to do is make sure that, if someone shows their cards and shows who they are and shows that they believe in lying and believing in untruths, that we don't, there's nothing wrong with voting for somebody and then being disappointed, but it's definitely something wrong with tying yourself to them and saying, well, I voted for him, so I'm gonna support him, even though you're out here lying, and even though you're out here scheming, and even though you're out here looking for injustice instead of justice. So it's important that you need to let go. I think we all have to let go. We all are fans of somebody. I thought Barack Obama was a great president, but if Barack Obama decided to go out here while he was in office and start lying, he was going to go out here and just start making up a whole bunch of stories, I'm not going to support you. As great as I may think you are, all right, my support for you is gone there. Doesn't mean, don't hate you, but I'm not going to vote for you again. I'm not going to keep it going just because, I think I'm on your team or something like that. And I think that's what we need to get at. So, yes, that's where we are. So I would encourage you to look this up. It happened in Michigan, 2014. You can look it up. Qualified immunity is going before the Supreme Court this year. I encourage you to stay informed with it and know what's going on and watch because it's important. It's important that we have a society of where you don't have to live in fear of just the police just ruining your life for no reason. Nothing you did wrong. And in reality, that's where we are right now. Black people have been in that we've been in that space for a long time. People of color have been in that space for a long time. But in reality, everyone is in that space. Everyone is in that space. One of the great equalizers, of course, that people always say is money or the lack thereof. Because if you don't have the big dollars, you're definitely in that space. And so, yeah. That's where we are. So as Christians, first thing is to pray about it, but to pray that the Supreme Court may do the right thing. Pray that they'll do the right thing, knowing that it's some people on there, who may or may not. Some don't want to be seen as wrong. They don't make mistakes. They don't accept responsibility for their mistakes or their failures. They are without sin. Yeah, and that is that pride, that arrogance, that people know that we're all flawed, but that pride and that arrogance, and I think that's what gets in the way. That's what gets in the way when we're talking about these lawyers and these judges or these legal systems, where it's not about the individuals. It's not about right or wrong. It's about them being perfect and making sure that they keep their self feeling like they're perfect. And so somebody could be in jail for decades. Somebody could get, like the gentleman in the story. And let me be clear, this is not a story. This is his story. This is truth. And this is going, I want to make sure that I'm not putting that out there like this is some made up story that's going on. You can definitely look it up. But yeah, it's people who sit back here and they want to think that they're flawless or they're perfect, or they want to think that the law is perfect and flawless, that the Constitution is perfect and flawless. And that's the silliest thing I think that anybody could ever think. All right. Oh, and that in perfect words for we all fall short of the glory of God. Yes. All right. Well, we're a little shorter tonight, but this was a great conversation. I feel like I think it's important that we all just stay informed and know what's going on. Again, Supreme Court, qualified immunity. Stay up on it and see what happens, and hopefully it'll prevail in a manner of decency. And qualified immunity will be reduced and eventually just go away because it's stupid. All right. Well, to everyone, on Thursday at 7:00, we're continuing all this month, fasting. Please join us for Thursday Thirst, 7:00, fasting. Great opportunity all this month. Learn about fasting. It's some great conversation. And as always, we'll be here on Tuesdays at 8:00. You can catch us live, Facebook, YouTube, as you already know. All right. Thank you for everyone who's all the great comments. Thank you for joining us. Please join us again. And this is Impact 2022.